the methadone clinics that I've been around, they don't ever encourage you to go down on your dose or talk about what that would look like for you. Or it's always, how are you feeling? Do you need to go up? It's
Oh,
always,
really?
oh, yes.
Huh.
So it's always a discussion. And I think it has more to do with money than anything.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we are talking with Amy. Amy's story is a pretty remarkable story. After her surgery, she accidentally became addicted to prescription pain pills, which led to years of addiction. At the height of her addiction, she was spending nearly $800 a day on pills to maintain her habit. Listen to Amy's remarkable story of recovery and how she helps out others in the position she was years ago. Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's been a while, probably going on 7 months now since we've last had a podcast back in the seat. And today I'm very excited to have Amy on the podcast. And Amy, I believe we communicated after I did a radio program right before COVID hit, I believe it was. So it seems like a long time ago. And you reached out and now, here we are. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And it was right around the time that COVID kind of broke out for everything. And I heard you on the radio and I was like, wow, this guy's amazing. There's not many people that don't struggle with addiction that are such champions for it. So it's nice to see people that are there to fight for us, because not everyone can even speak up. So thank you for doing this.
Well, no problem. Yeah, no problem at all. I was in that boat, before my brother died and before, I really knew anything that went on with him. I had that same stigma, right? Where, what you don't know is, what you don't know. And so you just kind of go off what you've been taught, the stigma that's been around it. And so it's always like, hey, why can't these people who are suffering or addicted, why can't they just stop, right? Yeah. Just stop, just say no, right? All that kind of stuff. So, like I tell people, it wasn't really until I found, and I'm sure this has probably happened to thousands of other people, it took them to find a loved one dead to understand addiction, to really, really fully understand the powers of addiction. So, so I would love for you to, share your story and how, you became where you're at now. And so take it away.
I'll try to do the Cliff Notes version for you here. I will say that, looking back, I had a different picture of like how things happened for me over the course of time. And originally my thought was just like, addiction happened like at this event, at this surgery that I had. So that's what I actually was introduced to Oxycontin. And looking back, it was so much more than that, like through childhood and traumas and like just finding little things that I could do to cope with what was going on in my life and ways to check out. So I didn't graduate to drugs until I was in my early 20s in 2002, and I had a major surgery.
Okay, 2002, your early 20s?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you say childhood trauma and stuff like that. Did you have any coping mechanisms for that? Or did you just not even understand what was happening at that time?
I mean, they were all unhealthy, So food was one of the very first ones. And by the time the surgery that I had was gastric bypass surgery, so weight loss surgery. And food had been my coping mechanism, most of my life at that point. And at the time I had surgery, I was 360 pounds. So it was there for me. It was my best friend. And there were some other not so healthy ones as well. So I was never taught coping skills or how to deal with the traumas that are happening or even process them. So that's the way I went.
And so you had your surgery, and that's when you got introduced to Oxy. And I would assume, do you remember how many pills and what dosage they gave you after the surgery?
After this, I can't remember the quantity, but I know that there was like the 5 milligram oxycodone to start with. And I remember taking them just very regimented and just it didn't really click for me initially. And just over the course of time, they thought it was like candy at that point. I mean, this way it felt is that it was handed out so freely, and no one ever talked about like dependency or what that looked like if you're on it long term or tapering off or any of that things, because people didn't really understand it at that point, I don't think. And my doctors kept refilling the prescriptions, and I was still in pain, legitimately in pain. But when it came time for me to go off the medication, it was just a cold cut off, done, and a hard line. And I had no clue what was going on with me. I was so sick. I had never felt that way in my life. And it took a friend to be like, "You're in withdrawal." And I'm like, huh? I mean, I was ignorant. My family never taught me about drugs and alcohol. I was like, addicted. Yeah. I'm not a crackhead. That's the only thing that's one thing I knew. And, at that point when they told me like, it's because you don't have the pills, I'm like, oh, well, I know how to fix that then. I don't want to feel like this. I was miserable. And it wasn't just physical, it was mental. I was a wreck.
And how long were you on the pills before you started, your process of, getting off of them?
You're talking about when it just doctor prescribed or like illicit use as well?
Yeah. So like after your surgery, like you mentioned, like they just kept prescribing, the doctors kept, prescribing and refilling your prescriptions.
At least a good 6 months.
Wow. Really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
And surgery, it was a major surgery. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
After my belly button to my sternum was cut all the way open.
Okay.
So I had like 35 staples at the front. It was major, but it wasn't 6 months of oxycodone major either.
Gosh, that's insane. 6 months. And so you're going through that. And like you mentioned, there was no, hey, we're going to start taping you off. And, you take, half a pill for the next week, et cetera. So describe people, I know it's probably difficult, but describe people what withdrawal is like, especially when you don't even know.
That's the thing I always say. It's so hard to describe unless you've been through it because, I can tell you the classical symptoms that doctors will tell you, For me, I call it temperature control. I can't get warm. I get cold. I'm like all over the place. I'm sweating, but I'm freezing. Body aches, vomiting, diarrhea, can't eat at all. Just irritable as can be, like anything that set me off. But the part that really got me really bad was what they call restless leg syndrome or restless legs. And to me, honestly, it feels like my bones are being shaved with a razor blade. It's the best way I can describe it.
Wow.
Like I couldn't sleep. Oh, God, horrible. Something I never wish to go through my life ever again. Ever.
I've had that, but not to nowhere near to that extent. Yeah. Yeah. Like I mentioned before the podcast was, like I had 2 major back surgeries in high school and, this was early 2000s as well. And, like I said, I'm so thankful I wasn't prescribed Oxy at the time. I think it was low dose Vicodin. And I mean, maybe, I remember it was about 30 pills. I maybe took half, for about a week and then I was done.
That's drug abuse is what I call that. That's drug abuse.
Yeah. I never got that. I want to back up. So when you started taking, your oxycodone after your surgery, did you get any sensation of like help ease your trauma or, your past traumas or anything like that? Or was it just strictly for pain?
Yeah, not initially. It was really just the pain. And I didn't take them sooner than I needed to. And I just was very strict with them. I remember because I would take it right before I go to bed was the time that was the most important because I would sleep otherwise, just the pain. But I remember thinking before I take them at night, like, okay, get all the things that you need to do, or get your water, get the things you need, because once you take this, you're going to be nailed to the couch or the bed or wherever you're laying down, and you can't move. That's the only part of sensation, euphoria that I can connect to it. But it wasn't just like this thoughtful checking out of any kind, not like that at all.
So you're 6 months in, and you start going with withdrawals. Did you just go right back to the pills just to get out of withdrawals, or how did you keep going?
Yeah, I knew people that, unfortunately I didn't have the greatest group of friends at the time. So I knew people that could get them from. And I should also say too, I began right when I went back to work after the surgery, which was about 6 weeks after or so, I got into a relationship that ended up being abusive. And he also had gastric bypass surgery 9 months after I did. So then there was more pills in the house at that point too. And it was really when things started getting bad with us and having those around at the same time and going through withdrawal at the same time that things went bad. It was like a perfect storm.
Yeah. So it sounds like it. So, you're going through this abusive relationship. You have the pills around. So basically by that time, it sounds like that's just basically a coping mechanism, taking those pills just to kind of escape your day-to-day reality.
Yep.
Yeah. Just survival.
Checking out. Yep.
Yeah. Checking out. And so how long then were you, going through this whole thing? How long were you on pills for?
It was 7/15/08. That was my last use. And so I had actually stopped like the major portion of my use stopped in 2006 when I picked up a full set of criminal charges behind them. By the time that I quit, my habit was so huge. It was so expensive that I couldn't afford it. So I found ways to afford it. It was that important to me at the time. So something to think about now, but yeah.
How much were you spending on a weekly basis to fund your habit?
This part makes me sick. I'm like, I could have bought a house. I was spending $800 a day. Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
A day?
I was taking Yeah, 20 of the 80 milligram Oxycontin a day. So 1,600 milligrams a day.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. I still managed to stay
Wow.
upright somehow. I don't know how I even walked at that point.
That's insane. 20, 80 milligram oxys a day, and you're spending $800 a day. Wow.
Yep.
And this was 05, 06 time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez, that's incredible. Yeah, it reminded me of, or reminds me. My wife and I are just watching the show Dope Sick right now, and I read the book, which is a wonderful book. In the show, I don't want to give it away, but they changed the doctor up, who's played by Michael Keaton, and he gets addicted during the show, and he starts taking the 80s every single day, stealing his clients' pills, and you just see it. And just because in the show he got into a car wreck and just started off with 10 milligrams and then just kept escalating it. It's so frustrating to see how they went from a 40 milligram top end to an 80 and then to a 160.
I didn't even know they have 160s. Oh my gosh,
they did. Yeah, it's crazy.
Have you ever seen the movie Ray? Ray Charles?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, when he's going through withdrawal in that movie, legit. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did it pretty well.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. So 80 milligram oxys, and I'm sure that was what mid. Yeah, he said 05, so it's probably flowing pretty free around that time. You can probably get it anywhere. Was there was this just through friends, doctors, or?
Oh, well, it just depended upon the time. I mean, back then there were the doctors that, were cash only, don't put it through insurance, you just pay an office visit fee and pay for your prescription. They didn't care. And then there's lots of little old ladies that get pain medicine and don't use them and sell them because they're on a fixed income. And those are like the main.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Really?
You wouldn't think grandma would down the street. Absolutely.
No.
Yep.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Jeez. Insane. So it's just everywhere. Just coming from all, wow.
And doctor shopping too, and just, going to the ER and stuff. And I mean, yeah, I still get crap when I go to the ER this many years later. And still say, we're not giving me any pain meds. I'm like, I didn't ask for any. I'm here for a bladder infection. Like, come on.
They still have notes in the hospital system.
I'm still red flagged. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. It frustrates me and angers me every time they pull that with me. But yeah, it is what it is.
So you went back to the ER back then, going through the doctor's office, to the ER. Did they ever flag you then? Or, at that point, was it?
It took
did they
a
really
while.
Not care?
It was before the PDMP, so they didn't really keep track of stuff. So I probably had a good hand in necessitating that PDMP.
And so when that came down, it was very easy to track. And so the PDMP is the drug prescription monitoring program. So
yes.
Okay. Wow. So $800 a day. 1,600 milligrams a day of oxy. What was, that cliche term of rock bottom? What made you stop?
Well, when I got into the criminal trouble that I did, I was put into drug court, and drug court put a good halt to stuff pretty well. I had a hard time stopping though. It took them jailing me several times, and I was actually the first person in Clackamas County at the time to be allowed onto Suboxone while in drug court. It was so taboo. And I mean, they treated me like crap because of it. But regardless, I was able to get on Suboxone, and I ended up getting pregnant while in drug court. And I stayed clean through my pregnancy. Did great until I went into labor. And a friend that I was out to lunch with, she's like, "Here, just take a couple of these. They're going to give you stuff at the hospital anyway." I didn't think that went through very well. And they tested me when I got there, and my son was positive, and they notified drug court, and drug court revoked me.
Wow.
So that was that turning point of like, I am done. Going to prison with a 6-day-old baby that I had to walk away from.
Yeah.
Nail in the coffin, done. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So this is an interesting topic, especially now with Measure 110 here in Oregon that passed last year, where I don't want to mix up words, where drugs aren't legalized, they're decriminalized. But, and I'm reading a book right now that kind of, are we being, I kind of want to ask your opinion. Are we being too lenient now where there is no intervention? Granted, we want to understand that, people with an addiction, they're not criminals. This is a disease that is, treatable. But, I find it ironic that, Oregon ranks, basically last in, almost last in services nationwide. We were 47th or 48th in services, top 5 in addiction. And then yet here we are, and there's no more intervention per se. And then the article came out in Oregon Live last week where people, if they do get a ticket or fine, they're not calling into that number, et cetera, so on. So what do you think of all this going on?
I haven't looked into the fine details of the measure, but I do know that at some point there is interventions that are put in place there. I think it's after the second offense of them catching you. Yeah, there's your mandated type treatment type stuff. So they just don't give you legal charges. Yeah, there is stuff that comes down with it.
Okay.
I often will log on to the Accountability and Oversight Committee, I think it is, Measure 110. Yeah. I just kind of listen to kind of see where things are. I think there is some consequences that come, but I don't think they come soon enough. I think the first time needs to be some more intervention, just because when you have that person in front of you and you have that moment, you need to be able to seize it, because you don't know that next time could be the last.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It seems like the people I've talked to, this is a small sample size, is the people I've talked to are the ones who have gone to drug court. And it seems like drug court, jailing, all that kind of stuff did help them get through, what their addiction.
It does.
Kind of yeah, I'm not advocating for it. It just seems like with everything going on right now in America and all the policies and, what's that fine line of how do we help intervene to get maybe just a moment of clarity? I
think the hard part, though, is that there's so few people that get into drug court that have all of these charges. So many people are just getting PCS charges left and right that don't get that opportunity or any information about treatment or anything like that. So
I see.
So those few selected, you don't automatically get into drug court. They have to go through this big long process of screening and accept you too.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. Do you know why that is?
I guess they have some sort of metrics that show, if you're in this grid, that you are likely to succeed, or it'll have a impact on your life or change. So there's certain crimes that you can't have to be in drug court, which I'm grateful for, but change the dynamic a bit.
Sure.
But yeah, I had to be accepted into it.
Okay, I did not know that. That's very interesting to know. So, like you mentioned, your final line was when you had to walk away into jail from your 6-day-old baby. How long did you stay in jail for at that time?
I was sent to prison, and I was accepted 26 months suspended sentence with drug court. Fortunately, I got into their alternative incarceration program, or AIP program, Turning Point, the drug and alcohol treatment in prison for 6 months. And by the time I completed the program, I'd been there 10 months. And so when you complete, you go home early. The rest of your time is forgiven if you do well. So I made it home by his first birthday, which was my goal.
Yeah. So what is that like going through, I guess, counseling through in prison? What was your experience like?
I loved it. It's going to sound really weird, but I think treatment is amazing. Just in the fact that, as adults, we have so much going on in our lives so many times, and just hectic, that we don't ever really get the time to just be sat down, look at ourselves, set some goals, and regroup. So I was just go, go, go. So that time just to cool my heels, it was needed.
Sure. Yeah. And so that's what, you're 6-7 years into your addiction by that time?
Yeah. I got out 6/26/09. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And got
I never went back to it.
Yeah.
But the hard part for me, though, is that I have dentures, and I had to have all my teeth removed. And then comes pain medication. I tried to do it without. And at the time, I was like, Mom, I need you to hold on to these for me and just hand them out to me. I just been home from prison only 6 months at the time, and I just didn't trust myself yet.
Oh, wow.
So just out of fear, I had her do that. And then it came time to get off of them again, and no taper plan. And I panicked. And that's when I got on to MHE services, because I was I refuse to go back to where I was, but I don't feel safe just not taking anything. So that's how that road began.
So, that's early 2010s-ish area. What was the process of getting onto MAT like at that time? Because it still seems like there's many barriers to get onto MAT at this time.
When I did so, I actually got onto methadone. I didn't really, I had gotten kind of scared of Suboxone from an experience I had while in drug court. And so I didn't know anything about methadone, and I probably should have done a little bit more research. But nevertheless, that was the route that I went. And I quickly found out that that's a lot of work. Oh my gosh, to go down there every single day and try and work. And I was a single mom, and it was a lot. But you have to be very, very motivated and dedicated to wanting to do something different. So I would never choose that road again for myself, but it's helped so many people that are on it. It helped me. I mean, I got a college degree while I was on methadone. I can't complain. Life got better. So, and then I switched to Suboxone. I was able to taper down and switch it over.
So for people that don't know, what is the difference between methadone and Suboxone?
Methadone is actually an opioid. It's not synthetic. It's a full opioid. And it's much stronger than Suboxone. You actually, unfortunately, have a feeling of euphoria that comes with it, especially if you manipulate their system and take too much, because they don't, at the methadone clinics that I've been around, they don't ever encourage you to go down on your dose or talk about what that would look like for you. Or it's always, how are you feeling? Do you need to go up?
Really?
Oh, yes.
Huh.
So it's always a discussion. And I think it has more to do with money than anything. But,
I was going to ask, is there incentives on the back end?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. For them, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Jeez.
But, it's very, very, it stays in your system a lot longer. And people still thought I was loaded. That's the hard part. It sucked. People still looked at me the same way, and it was rough. And Suboxone I feel normal. There's no feeling that goes with it. I just feel normal on Suboxone. It's a synthetic, partial opioid agonist or something like that. I don't know use the correct terms, but it's so much nicer on your system. It's easier to get off of. It has a blocker in it. So if you were to use other opiates, like if I were to try and take oxycodone while on Suboxone, I would get sick. Whereas methadone, you can continue to use on top of it, which is so dangerous. And so for me, I look at methadone as more people that are more ambivalent about what they want or have such a severe addiction that Suboxone is just not going to cut it.
Sure. Okay. Wow. So methadone is that an everyday?
Yeah. In the beginning, you go every single day. Drug testing and all that. I have to do 2 groups a week, meet with a counselor once a week in the beginning. And they slowly kind of let the leash out. And the amount of time I was there, I was only going in once a month. So it wasn't bad. I could manage life at that point very easily. But you also have to continue to stay clean and do all the things you're supposed to do to get that the ability. So
it's interesting. I never really knew anything about MAT services, up until after my brother died. And even when I heard about them, it's interesting from a person who's never been through addiction or anything like that. I never, because I hear the stigma of people on MAT, right? First of all, I don't get it, but is the stigma coming from more within the community of people who have gone through addiction, or is it the outside community? Because for me personally, I'm on antidepressants for my anxiety. And so it's just a basic, maintenance therapy so I can, live a happy, healthy, everyday life. Right. And same with MAT. So does that stigma come from the outside, or is that more within the addiction community?
It's definitely within both. Although I think it's more heavily biased in the recovery community.
Okay.
Especially like AA and NA rooms. Absolutely.
Why is that? Just because for certain people, it's just, hey, I'm doing it this way and I'm quote unquote sober without doing any other sort of, maintenance. Okay.
I think some people just have to have someone else to look down on to make themselves feel better. And unfortunately, that the recovery community could be just so different if people were just accepting an MAT. I have no desire to ever go to an AA meeting again by the way I was treated. None.
Really?
And they're doing a lot of people a disservice with the way that they treat people. Oh, yeah. I guarantee it. The way that people act has caused overdoses. I guarantee it.
For people on MAT or just people doing a different way of recovery?
Yeah, people think that there's only one way to do it. Like, you have to do this, and this, and then you're recovering. It's not how it works.
So it sounds like for your recovery, it sounds like, MAT services did you very well. Did the NAAA meetings help out at the beginning before this whole judgment came on, or was it just not for you?
They could have. I just never got far enough. And when I was in drug court, we were required to go to 3 meetings a week, but I chose to go to Celebrate Recovery, which is a little bit more faith-based. And so it's not the same crowd. But it could have had a great benefit. I'm sure I missed out on a lot by not being able to work the steps and have a sponsor and build that support within the rooms. But I found my own way to do it instead, But, I had no regrets, but life could have been different. Could have been better. Who knows? But I know there's a lot of people that are harmed by the way that they're treated in there.
Wow, that's too bad. So how long did this whole process? So you said it was about 6 months after you got home from prison that you had your dental surgery, and so then you were on methadone for a while. Are you still on MA2 services, or are you done with Suboxone?
Well, I was on methadone for like 8.5 years.
Okay.
It's hard to get off of. And for a long time, I was just stable and staying in one place. But to be able to switch over, and then I switched over to Suboxone, and I did that while working up at the hospital up at OHS. I was sick as a dog. But you have to taper your methadone down to 30 milligrams and then be completely abstinent from everything for 72 hours in between the two. And I'm telling you, those 72 hours...
Same as withdrawal?
It was rough. Oh, yeah, because methadone stays in your system so long. The half-life is just, it continues on. And in previous times of going on to Suboxone, I had been put into what's called precipitated withdrawal, which means there are still opiates in your system, and it's making, like, it's hardcore withdrawal, like times 10. And so I was scared of having that happen. So I actually waited 5 days in between the two when I switched over, and I still went in precipitated withdrawal because of the half-life of methadone. So, but I pushed on through, and I know it was touch and go there for a minute. There were a lot of late night phone calls.
Wow.
But, then I was on Suboxone. That was 2018. I switched over. Now I'm tapered off Suboxone at this point. So, it's so easy to get off of.
So, but during this time, I should go back. Like you said, you mentioned you were up on the hill. For people that know, it's OHSU. So you were, you had jobs, you're a single mom, all that kind of stuff. So you were living a happy, healthy life. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I got a college degree while I was on methadone. Got my associates in human services and with drug and alcohol counseling certification with it. Originally, I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. I just wanted to go back to school, and then like, oh, I can use this thing that's a deficit as an asset. And I like helping people. And I kind of feel like I'm kind of rectifying some of my wrongs. Perfect. Okay, great.
Sure.
And initially I was going to do counseling and needed to get paid at the same time as doing my internship. So it's like, oh, I can be a, peer support and see how that goes. And I never looked back. I said, forget counseling. I'm not sitting in an office having to be all rigid with my boundaries. Forget that stuff. And so I've stayed with peer support since 2014.
Oh, wow.
That's what I've done ever since.
Yeah. Just here locally in Portland, the Portland area, Metro. Okay. Yeah. Wow. And then, so up in OHSU, was that the
Impact
Dr. Okay. Was that with Dr. Englander?
Yeah. The Impact team.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. I talked to her a couple of years ago, and that is, I went
She's
to her
amazing.
Lecture at OHSU, and I was just blown away by the whole program and what they're doing up there. And it sounds really incredible. So,
yeah. And she's one of the coolest normies I know.
She is so nice. Super nice. So through this time, let's talk about your recovery. I know we talked about methadone and Suboxone, all that kind of stuff. What kept you going, through recovery? I know you mentioned your child at the very beginning, but, any hardships that, did you have any cravings, during those? Yeah. And so how do you
just get better all overnight? Absolutely not.
Yeah. I think that's a misconception where people think, I know it was a part of us was, once you're, like my brother, we thought once he was done, after treatment, the cravings go away, et cetera, so on. But, as we all know, that does not happen now. So for you, how did you adjust and cope with your cravings? For me, it was a matter of finding people that I could talk to and could be completely honest with. And like initially, I thought that person would be my mom because we had an amazing bond, but it scared her too much. She couldn't handle it emotionally. And so, fortunately, the times that I did spend in the rooms of like AA and NA, I'd met some people out in the recovery community. And I know a ton of people now just working in the field, but it was having those relationships and people to talk to honestly and just like spill my guts when I needed to. And just instead of trying to stuff my feelings down and just ignore them like they didn't exist, just acknowledge them, work through it and realize it's going to happen. Life does not stop at all. And so, what I didn't understand though was like, where are these cravings coming from? I just thought it was just, wind blows and okay, I'm having a craving. And come to find out, like I understand it so much more now that like the experiences that we have, whether it's smelling something, tasting something, seeing something, a sound, those things trigger to other things. And if all of a sudden I get the smell of cologne that my boyfriend wore that was abusive with me, it can take me mentally right back there and I don't even realize it. It's just so subconscious. And so things like that were triggering to me and I didn't understand it for a while. And I finally started journaling. I'm like, why is this happening? And so I just kind of worked through things and kind of, did a little research. I'm like, oh, this makes so much more sense on like the
the logical side of it, which is how I wrap my brain around things. Like I have to have the logic behind it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned, journaling, because I was listening to a podcast with Jewel, the singer, and, her whole upbringing, which I never knew was crazy. But, she's mentioned, she went homeless around the age of 18, all these panic attacks from her childhood trauma. And, and then she mentioned she started journaling every day of what she would do with her hands, because she was either, grabbing something to, to steal or eat or whatever it may be. And she mentioned after 2 weeks, how that just, 2 to 4 weeks, of journaling every single step, how that really helped her with her anxiety and panic attacks. And, like you mentioned, journaling and I'm trying to kind of get to the root cause of it. It seems like that's a very, I heard it multiple times from other people too. It's a very healing process, being able to track what you're doing.
I mean, if you don't know the problem, how can you fix it?
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, I'm terrible at it. I always say I'm going to do it, but, I never have a pen or paper near me or whatever it may be.
The desire,
Yeah, right. That's what I say, but, it's a classic excuse. So now you've been in peer support now for 7 years, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So what is that like? Do you work with people all ages, or is it a certain demographic?
In peer support, too, there's like certain limits as far as age goes. You have to be under the age, I think, of 35 to be able to work with youth. I think that's where the line is. And I'm just barely over 35.
Okay.
So basically any adult is the demographic that I can work with. And some organizations strictly want, females working with females, men working with men. Some, it doesn't matter. Some, go into more depth of how to match peer support with the peer. And some just like roll the dice, let's see how it works out. It's just, I've had a variety of different caseloads specific to like prison release or jail or housing or whatever the case may be. My near and dear favorite, so, is working with women that are pregnant and DHS involved. Those are my, like those two like things. And then criminal justice involved stuff. It's like those really complex systems to maneuver.
Sure. I'm just barely getting there to understand, talking with people on this podcast of the criminal justice system. And then, what I think people forget is you think people serve their time, and then when they come out, they go about their life. But then you forget about the barriers of, just trying to find housing because you've had a previous sentence, et cetera, so on. So yeah, it's been very eye-opening for me just listening to people talk about that. That's why I do mention, we kind of talked about, 110, where you don't want to put people in prison, but like someone said on the podcast, you just need a timeout sometimes, which was a very,
you need to be safe from yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's that very fine line. And then how do we integrate people? Seems like a lot of it too, is we've got to get better at integrating people back into everyday life after they get released.
Yes, absolutely. The faster, the better too. But that's why I love peer support, is being able to have someone by your side that's been down that road and can understand the addiction part of it too is priceless. Like, I wish I would have had peer support like that. It would have been amazing. But I mean, the thing I tell people too with it have a record is appeal. Anytime you're told no, don't give up, because it took a simple appeal for me to get housing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So 7 years in peer support, how have you seen, I don't know if this question makes sense, how have you seen addiction change in those 7 years? Has it gotten more intense? Is it, I know with meth, with a massive, resurgence in meth, has it, has the addiction changed, or is it kind of stay the same?
The thing that's really changed is fentanyl.
Yeah.
Not coming into the mix of everything. I mean, that was not a thing when I was using.
Yeah.
That's so scary and so dangerous. I'm glad that I'm not a part of it now. But I mean, at first we just thought it was, just in heroin, and no. They're putting it in meth. I mean, in anything just to, alter it, make more money. And it's scary. Yeah, that's the main thing that's changed as far as like the addiction side of it. And it's got more expensive, of course, too. But yeah.
So, it's funny. A lot of people say, especially with this fentanyl crisis going on in America, is, why don't people just stop? People you see, what do they say? I'm sure they understand there is the potential that the last, injection or the last pill they take could be their last time, right? I know with that craving, what do they say stuff like this could be my last day, or?
Not most people know. But that's why a lot of the talks, like as peer support, a lot of the talks that we have are centered around harm reduction.
Yeah.
But just, return to use is a reality for most people,
Mm-hmm.
Very few go through and stay stopped for the rest of their life. And so having those discussions about how to stay safe if you're going to return to use and to not die,
Mm-hmm.
knowledge is power.
Yeah. So for harm reduction, what are your first 3 tips you would give someone?
Oh boy, first 3. Test dose or test shot. That's number 1. That's
Mm-hmm.
because, you don't know if you're getting something from a new person or a new batch or whatever, you don't know the ratios of anything. Have someone else with you. Don't ever be alone, and to not reuse any of your materials, like clean needles, clean cotton, all that stuff. If you don't die, you still don't want to get, Hep C. You don't want to get AIDS.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this fentanyl crisis, it's so as I mentioned, it's about almost 3 years ago now. My brother died of a fentanyl overdose, and on the West Coast at that time, it wasn't, especially in Oregon, it wasn't terribly prevalent. I knew a family friend, but someone who he was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years younger than me, went to the same high school. He previously died of a fentanyl overdose in 2016 or 2015, so really kind of early on. He was 24, and now you see it. And I was talking to someone who, within the community here, their son died last December when he came home from college for winter break, fentanyl overdose. And then, I talked to the parents a couple of weeks ago, and there they were saying, they're very involved with the community now. And there's been 5 people within the school district who have passed away in the last year, 15-year-old, girls who had a sleepover, or 16-year-old girls who were having a sleepover, thought they were taking some Xanax or pill, whatever it may be. And, wake up dead. It opened, it's happening because there's almost 100,000 overdose deaths now, and the majority of those are fentanyl. And it's just like
sick number. God.
It is. It really is. And, for me, I took the last 6 months off, 7 months off, just because I was kind of just, with COVID and then, all the political stuff and everything. It just, I was finally run down. I just did not want to talk about death and drugs and all that stuff anymore. And it wasn't until September, when I was reading an article, and here it comes, almost 100,000 deaths. And I'm like, oh my God. And that just, for whatever reason, I think the year my brother died, it was 67,000. And that was just 3 years ago.
Wow.
And now here we're up to 100,000, and who knows how high it's going to go after this, because this does not look like it's going to stop.
Yeah. COVID did us no favors in that area at all.
No. It's I shouldn't say funny, but the ironic part, of harm reduction, when people say never use alone, but, addiction is such an isolating, disease, right? Where you don't want to use with someone else. And, it is very important to use with someone, especially to have naloxone on hand. So in case there is an overdose.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. To be able to hopefully revive them if they do overdose.
Even if you don't have someone right there, just to call somebody and be like, hey, if you don't hear from me in the next few minutes, check on me. If you want to be more private, that's fine. But find ways to have someone check on you. Yeah. In my recovery, about 2 years ago, I had to help someone that had an overdose, and I had never watched someone go through it. And man, does that burn on your brain? It's so incredibly sad.
Yeah, it is. It's terrible. So now, with almost 12 years in your recovery, what does your day-to-day look like?
Well, I have 13, by the way. That's okay.
13.
And I should say too, the cool part for me is that since I took the pain medication, when I went into labor with my son, he wasn't born until the next day. So his birth date is my clean date. So I plan to not change.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, buddy, we're 13 today. So I'm sorry, I got distracted. What was your question you just asked me?
Oh, that's okay. No, so what does your day-to-day look like 13 years now in recovery?
Working in peer support, I think it looks a little different than the average Joe would, because I'm still engaged in the topic still. But triggers and cravings, it doesn't even really come up. And for me before, if something would have triggered me and I would sat there and thought about it, I made plans, I would have been almost out the door in the car. I had got right to that point where now it's just if something comes up, it's oh, yeah, whatever, keep on moving. It's not a thing anymore. My first thought when something happens isn't just to check out. But for me, I just doing life, being a mom, working, taking care of things that I need to, still, for my recovery, still keeping connected with people that, help me to be a better me still, because that's a never ending process. So, I'm grateful to be an addict. And I know that sounds super stupid, but I was an asshole before recovery, before addiction. So now I have this roadmap of how to not be that person. And if you take one piece out of the puzzle, the rest doesn't fit. So I'll take it. I'm happy.
Yeah, it's interesting. With hardships, people always, you talk to people who've gone through addiction, and not all of them, but it seems like the majority do say, "I'm glad I went through that because it formed me who I am today and led me to where I am." It's very cool to see.
Yeah, I am very, very grateful for where I am in life. I have plenty of things I could bitch about if I wanted to,
Sure.
But so much to be grateful for that it just overshadows it. And the one thing that I'm grateful for, just beyond measure, is that, when my mom passed in 2016, that she was able to see me clean and sober and knew, and she's like, "I know you're going to be okay now," and that priceless.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And she's one of the people I've hurt the most in my addiction.
Yeah. Kind of redemption at the end.
Yeah.
She knows you're going to be okay. So with so much going on with COVID in young kids now and teenagers, anxiety, stress, suicides, gone through the roof, all that kind of stuff. What, if you could go back and tell your younger self, what would you tell yourself now?
That it may feel like it's the end of the world, whatever crisis you're going through. There's other ways to deal with it than that. Sometimes the experiences that we go through, there's positive in all of them, whether it's 1% or 99%. There's always positive to be found, and the way that you look at a situation, the attitude that you have about it, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
It's
so true.
So much I could change in what I'd learned and understood about the way that we work as people. But
yeah.
So that's what I get to teach my little ones that I have, is trying to teach that little me. I get to teach them that stuff. And God willing, they don't have to go through the things I did, but
sure. Right. I know that was one of the things, when our first son was born, you had to write, you had all the paper forms and stuff. And, it's like, do you have substance use in your family? And it's like, yes, that's just not my brother, but on my dad's side, his dad and all that kind of stuff. So it is something. I look at them now and they're so young and innocent, 3 and 8 months or 9 months. But you look at it and you're just like, you pray every day, I hope they don't have that gene or whatever it is, that they have to go through that.
To some degree, they're genetically predisposed already, and it's about what can you do to fight against that percentage that they've got going on inside them. You got to tip the scales. So I look at it.
Exactly. Well, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm glad you're, 13 years now in recovery. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And get to hang out with your son every day and live a, happy, healthy, prosperous life.
I'm very, very grateful as well. Thanks for having me, Eric. I appreciate it. And again, thanks for the work that you do and being a voice for people like us, for sure.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you for listening to the Henry Zunkel podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. If you would like to learn more about a nonprofit, please go to henryzunkel.org. As we say here at Henry Zunkel, you are loved, never judged.